Hello and welcome to Nerdicky, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm joined by Sadie Rogers. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good. Happy to
You
be
had
here.
reached out to us because you're working on a film project that's kind of D&D inspired, and I'm like, well, that sounds really cool. And you also have done some other things. So if you just want to kind of introduce yourself and give the elevator pitch to
Yeah,
people that are
absolutely.
watching.
Absolutely. I'm Sadie Rogers. Oh, hang on just a second. There we go. Had a little sound issue. I'm Sadie Rogers. The project is Heart of the Trepid. It is a feature film about a group of people now in their 40s reconvening to take up a 17-year-old Dungeons and Dragons campaign. It is going to be shot in the Midwest, and we are hoping to possibly shoot it in 2021, pandemic pending. Yeah.
That's awesome. So what inspired you to do a movie about D&D? And were you a longtime gamer beforehand?
I have been officially playing a continual game, three different campaigns, but the same group of people now. I realized this week for 4 years straight. As I started gaming after I made a short film about D&D, so I kind of came into it from kind of made something about D&D, researched D&D, and as I was telling you, Dave, one of my biggest YouTube researches was Nerdarchy, so that's super exciting to be here. And then I started playing after I made the short film RPG and got addicted to it, and now I play quite a bit, and I DM for kids.
So how did you go from wanting to make a film to wanting to make a film about D&D? It's kind of like a little fringe.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the short film that inspired the feature was actually based on a game of chess that I was watching when I was waitressing, and I wanted to recreate what I saw at the chess table, which was basically a group of adults who were very into this specific game and had a very specific community built around this specific game. And when I started writing the short, I decided to replace chess with D&D. Um, it at first seemed like just kind of an avant-garde choice from the side, but when RPG ended up doing really well and playing in a lot of festivals and has had a healthy life online at Short of the Week, I then was like inspired to go ahead and write a feature film about it. um, it's making a movie that has a game within the movie is a crazy, it's not like a Chris Pine fight the dragon running CGI type movie. It's literally people sitting down at a table and rolling d20s, and so you have the person who's playing the character, and then you have the actor playing the person playing the character, so it gets a little crazy, but yeah.
Very meta. Although,
Yeah.
in light of the Queen's Gambit, maybe you should have stuck with chess.
Right. Oh man, I watched that show and I literally had no freaking clue what was going on the entire show. My only experience with chess is playing with 10 and 11-year-olds, and they always win, and I'm just like, I can't see past three moves. Nothing.
Oh, I don't think that far ahead when I play chess either. I play very intuitively, for better or worse. Um, yeah, but you know what? Like movies like that, and even the one you're working on, it's never about the thing, right? That's not what people really care about, even though they think they do. It's always about like the interpersonal connections between the characters and this and that story and the drama is what pulls people in anyway. Um, have you checked out the gamers?
The gamers, no. What's that?
So the gamers is basically it is kind of like a movie, but it's more of a comedy where they're playing D&D and then they go in and out of the game. There's been a couple of them like that. I think it's the Dead Gentleman's Society. I want to say, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
yes. Okay.
And
Yeah, that is on my.
they did a
Go
couple
ahead.
of movies called The Gamers as well. So I'm as I get older, I'm like more and more into that as kind of a genre.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. I mean, this movie is very much, even though D&D isn't at the center of everything, and there is definitely a sort of parallel metaphorical theme happening within the game and the movie. The movie itself is really much more about aging and the trauma of aging and mental illness and physical illness and what it is to be thrown back with a group of people that you have either stayed in touch with or not, but have very much gone on to live their lives, and all of a sudden you're thrown in a room with them for one night and you have to play this game that meant so much to you when you were young. And it's like, you know, it's much more about the aging and the nostalgia and unrequited love and the struggles of the awkwardness, the social awkwardness of that event.
So for you, what was the appeal to D&D as the backdrop?
I think that, so I mean, it's a little bit personal, but like I think that for me, when I actually finally started playing D&D, I was like, I'm just such a like hyperactive, high energy person, and I have a little bit of a hard time um, focusing in. I'm either focused in or I'm not, and like D&D helped me with that. I started playing with a group of friends that I met at a job, and I was like, this is such a healthy social game that you have to have creativity, but you also have to listen. Um, Actively listen for a long amount of time. You have to world build and collaborate constantly. And it was very helpful because it caused me to like zero in and also be social. So I think that made me fall in love with the game even more. And having that experience and then the short film as well, I was like, this is a thing a movie needs to be made about. This is the every person's escapism. This is like a game that anyone can play and experience joy. And whether you are doing it virtually on Zoom or in the room with people once again soon, um, it gives you this sort of constructive world building lovely experience.
There's also something like I think you kind of hit on it when you conceptualize this movie, but I don't know if you would have known that when you came up with it. It's like when we have this shared hobby, like I can go pretty much anywhere in the world and meet someone I've never met before that is also a gamer, and you have this shared experience and this shared language where you're able to connect with them instantly. And that's why, like for a movie like this, like D&D is such a great backdrop
I
because
Yeah,
of that.
I absolutely agree. I like the connections I've made. I mean, on Sunday nights right now, I'm playing Curse of Strahd with a DM in New Zealand and like a couple dudes in Miami, and like I don't know, like it's just so amazing. We come online together and we play D&D, and it's a universal language. It's so great. There's also like, I don't know if it's always been this way, and you and me kind of touched on this earlier, but there's an openness to the game now, an acceptance and an openness, and everyone is welcome at the table. And that, like I said, that might not be how it always was. I certainly know when I was a little girl and my brother played, I thought it was just a thing guys did, and I
Yeah.
didn't. But this movie is very much about inclusivity, and the table is very much a diverse table, and that is very true to the reflection of the D&D culture in Chicago. Like if you go to Dice Dojo, like it's not just a bunch of like it's not a male dominated world anymore. It's everybody, and it's great.
It is changed a lot and for the better for sure. More voices and more perspectives is always better. Um, me growing up playing, it was always kind of like male dominant, always a bunch of dudes. Occasionally someone's significant other would show up, and it never felt like they were there for the game. They were just there to hang out with their boyfriend or whatever. It
Right,
wasn't
right, right.
until like years later that our table just naturally kind of started getting more diverse as we met more people and invited them to play. Um, and at one point I started running a stream game, and I just reached out to all women gamers because I'm like, I've never really had a game where
Mhm.
women were involved. So I 3 or 4 different women that I had met online, I invited them, and we ran something like 63 sessions or something,
Oh my God, yeah.
and which was a lot of fun. And I've even had like I had another like dungeon master. He asked me, he's like, "Well, how do you run for women?" I'm like, "I run the same. They don't necessarily always interact with things the same way, but for my part, I did everything the way I always do, and then I just respond to what they did, and but it was a way for me because I had this platform to actually have a different experience than I've had in the
Yeah.
past. But
Yeah. No, go ahead. Sorry.
no, I was just gonna say, like, now, it's been great because playing with people from all over the world, all different ages. It's just it's good for the hobby. It's good for society.
I almost always end up playing a guy, and most of the guys I play with tend to play guys too. And it wasn't until I started playing with kids that I finally got some kids that were uh, male that wanted to play women in the game, and I was like, oh, cool. Like, so it was funny. Like, I think a lot of society's a little more open to gender bending and gender fluidity inside of a game as well as in the real world. Thank the gods. And it's cool to make a character that is, I mean, D&D, like, so I don't mean to like go off on a tangent, but it's a really interesting conversation that I've been having with gamers lately. Is there's D&D, which is, sort of wilderness adventure, slay the monster, how many random encounters will happen on the way from point A to point B. There's like the basis of the moving on the hexes, and then there's the sort of theater man's D&D or theater person's D&D, which is like the RP side of it. These are two very strong games that are put together, which is what makes D&D so great. But it can also mean that when you sit down as the DM at the table, you have a very mixed group of people expecting very different things.
That is one of the challenges as dungeon master or the GM, is to figure out what everyone at the table wants, and provide at least some of that for everybody. But also, I will say, like, I've noticed over the years that even when people have kind of put themselves in these like very specific boxes, the more they get exposed to other stuff, I find them bleeding over, right? And they're not so locked in as maybe they thought they were. So, there's always room for growth in either direction.
Absolutely. I think that the people that come at it from a theater background or whatnot, it influence the people who come at it from a very like second edition or whatever background. Yeah. And vice versa. I have found myself growing more a little bit more obsessed with the mechanics of D&D lately than the role playing, especially as a DM. I mean, when you're homebrewing a session and you're working on it for like 2 or 3 hours and you're digging through all of these books, like you start to like it, the joy becomes about, what challenge rating to put with what blah, blah, blah. And what, it's really fun. It's like,
you're a builder, great. You're like a mad scientist trying to make this monster. Yeah. So Brian wants to know, Onward was about D&D, but mainly about the relationship between brothers. It had some specific D&D references, though. Did you work any little Easter eggs into your project?
Right now, Brian, hello. Right now, the project has not just Easter eggs, but a chicken just popped eggs all over the nest, because our movie is very much a group of people playing 5e with players' handbooks, monster manuals, dice apps. Literally, the game itself they play is homebrewed about a land called Insendrone, but they are playing specific classes and races from 2nd edition, slightly modified to be in 5th edition, and they talk about that in the movie. Now, Dave and I were talking earlier, like, that might change if Wizards of the Coast don't give us their blessing. So please, if anyone knows them, send them our love. But the script would be modified at that point, and it would become a lot more like Homeward. What's that movie called? Spellbound? Homeward Bound?
Onward.
Yeah. It would become a little bit more like Onward, with only like with only things like the gelatinous cube or the rogue that they threw in that movie, which but the vibe of that movie is strangely similar to Heart of the Trepid in that
Yeah.
it's a quest beside a quest, like parallel quests, real life being, metaphor lineup kind of thing. So
What? Yeah, I don't even know how that works with copyright and the laws when you're like referencing things in a story. I feel like Butcher has referenced a lot of stuff in his books, and I don't know
um,
that like every little thing like you go to a company and get permission for.
well, D&D has a lot of stuff that is open content. A lot of the older stuff is, but there is quite a bit that isn't. So that would be
Yeah,
why my movie is written so much as a love letter to Dungeons and Dragons that it would change. It would be like um, lower basement rooms and scary monsters. I don't know. I'm trying
yeah,
to think. But that is
Mm,
not going to be like that. Change sounds a little overwhelming, but at the end of the day, it would be pretty easy. It's kind of like computer chess is very obviously about. What my friend gave me this example. Computer chess is very obviously about IBM, but they don't like show it all the time. Or like
yeah,
Talladega Nights is clearly about NASCAR, but you don't see the NASCAR sign. Like, I don't know, like sometimes you just have to kind of make it just a little bit different. Like,
yeah.
so
So like in Of Dice and Men, I don't think they ever name the game they're playing. They just say
right.
call it the game, talk about gaming. But it's like when
Mhm.
you see them like sitting around the table and the dice and the DM screen, like you just know what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Yeah, and the good thing about Heart of the Trepid is that there are three separate times in the movie where these people sit down and play D&D.
Yeah.
And when they sit down and play, they are playing a homebrewed game in a world similar to Middle Earth, a little bit more than Faerun, than Faerun or whatnot. So when it actually comes to playing the game in the world they're in, it's very much my own thing. But there are, like I told you earlier, there are conversations in the script because the movie is about tabletop gaming. There are conversations about the different versions of D&D and how to play second into fifth and all this stuff. So we'll see. But we have like really high hopes. And being two women, my producer Grace Hahn and I are two women making a movie about tabletop gaming, and we have a huge amount of like energy and positivity behind us, pushing us with this project. And we think Wizards is going to see that and want to talk about it. So
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed.
Yeah. So you said you've got a game that's been going on for 4 years now. That's pretty impressive too. Many gamers struggle to get a consistent group to stick together.
Yeah, it's well, I've died 3 times, so I guess we my dear friends Matt, Sarah, Sam, and Adam, we started playing almost a little over 4 years ago, every Monday night, and I had no idea what I was doing, Dave. I had no idea. I was such a bad player. I mean, I knew D&D from watching YouTubes and stuff like that and making the short film. I knew the game, but I did not understand how to play the game. And like I told you, my attention span with mechanics. And then I just got better and better and more into it. I died, I think, twice in the first campaign. And then we shifted to a different DM, and then we shifted to a different DM. So we've taken turns kind of.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, we are playing a Wild West D&D game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, with little blast bolt wands. And I'm currently I just died and came back as a, what are they called? The little frog person?
Oh,
Of
Grung.
course. No, think like
Bullywogs.
Bullywog. I'm a Bullywog
Yeah.
sorcerer. I've only played one session with my new character, and the other players seem a little bit like, what is this? But yeah, I turn into a gaseous cloud a lot and just stay in corners.
Oh,
So it's
nice.
great.
Yeah, I don't like when I hear someone's like, "Oh, I'm a bad player," when you're new to the game, whatever. Because the mechanics are like the least important thing to me, for the most part. Like even when I learn a new game, I don't want to learn all the mechanics. I just want to play, right? So like my approach generally, and also if I'm bringing someone into the game, I'm like, look, just tell me what you want to do in the game, and then we'll figure out how to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's how I want to learn a game as well. Like, yeah, I'll tell you what I'm going to try and do. You just tell me what I need to roll, and then I'll learn it that way. Otherwise, especially D&D, it's super intimidating. Like you've got 3 books, and they're all like 300 pages, so it's
Yeah.
a lot of information.
Yeah, it really is. I think my biggest, it's interesting, my biggest challenge with running D&D for kids um, has been session zero. You get maybe 4 or 5 10-year-olds on Zoom, and you're like, what do you want to be? And they're like, ah! And they just say all these super creative things. And you're like, okay, let's roll up these characters. And they're like, what do you mean? And then, so I never charge for session zero. I always let it go as long as it needs to, and send them tons of just take our time and create their characters. And God, they're so freaking creative. Like I let them sort of I'll use the mechanics of the game to sort of construct it, but for the most part, I try to yes and everything,
Yeah,
because why not? Like the only goal is for them to have fun. But I try, I have kids with wings that don't work, or scars that if you touch them, you take necrotic damage, just really strange homebrewed body things. Their kids are so good at understanding the space they take up in the imagination, compared to adults. I think they're able to step right in. They don't role play as much as adults do. They just talk about it, but they can see themselves in the world a little easier, I think. So that's cool.
yeah. I mean, when I describe D&D to people, I'm like, we play make believe and roll funny shaped dice. It's so kids are like right there. They're in the zone. I also
Yeah.
find they want to steal a lot. They want to push all the boundaries they can push.
They want to steal everything. Yeah. They want to steal from each other too. And I have this really strict rule about player versus player that I learned the hard way, because one of the first things I did, first game I played, was try to steal from one of my other players. And the DM was like, just don't be like that. And so teaching kids to understand campaign glue, that for whatever reason, no matter what you are, dragonborn, half orc, bullywug, sorcerer, you are on a mission together. And even if you don't like each other in the game, like your characters don't, there's still the campaign glue of I must do this quest, and respecting the arc. Yeah.
That's like a huge thing, right? The party player versus player. I find most people aren't very good at handling that, and and then it creates a feud between the players, not the characters. And I can only imagine with kids that's going to get compounded.
Also, kids love to kill my NPCs, which I take great joy in it. But at first, I didn't know what to do. I was like, don't kill him. He's going to give you the key to the blah, blah, blah. But they're like, can I just kill him? And I'm like, now that I've been doing this for almost a year, 18 hours a week for almost a year. Now, when people want to kill an NPC, I'm like, go for it. I'll build the story in some other way. And you can be a murder hobo for the first 3 or 4 sessions. Eventually, you're going to start wanting to actually, play. And it is kind of funny that first time that they, realize I'm in a world where I can literally do anything. I can Grand Theft Auto anything. Let me just see what happens if I just, it's pretty funny.
They like to push the boundaries wherever they can. So do you then start introducing consequences slowly to their actions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Get them taken prisoner. Have to get a jailbreak out going. That kind of stuff is really fun, though. As a player myself, I have a secret love for that one person in your game that is a little chaotic, that causes the drama, because they really push the story. Okay, maybe not a murder hobo, but that one player that says the wrong thing or goes too far, especially in a diplomatic situation, and then you're like, here we go, we got to save him from jail or whatever. That's the fun stuff.
The party's deliberating over what to do about this door they're standing outside of, and the barbarian just kicks it in.
Yep. And I played my first barbarian early in the pandemic, and I was like, and now I see why people love this. You have such an easy way to react to things I was a Yonti barbarian. It was so fun. That campaign fizzled, but I think it's going to be picked back up. So don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a bit of the chaos in me when I'm a player, and I like the like meta game, but like in a bad way, for the party. Like I was playing one character that wasn't that smart, and I knew the DM was using brown mold, and I know it gets worse when you apply fire. But my character was like, "Oh, it's cold. I know what I need: fire to make it warm." Yeah, making it worse. Or that same character also tried wrestling a black pudding, which also did not go very well.
Oh my! You wrestled a black pudding. Wait, did you die?
No, no, no. But but I played him where he would always like he had certain responses to things, and he was kind of he had a lot. Intelligence was his dump stat. He would always learn from his mistakes, but he'd always make the mistake first.
My most recent character death was mostly due to me having. When I built her more about the character and less about. I didn't min max her at all, and I rolled kind of low when I built her. So when she died, I actually thought it made sense that she died because she was the weakest and
Yeah.
she didn't have a lot to offer the group. And even though I'd been playing her for at that point a full year, I kind of thought I was kind of like, yeah, kudos to you, DM. She should die. Like, she's weak and she doesn't have a lot to offer. And she's been traveling with this party and kind of throwing them off constantly. She was smart, but she just didn't have a lot of constitution and was built strange. And that was on me because I built her more as a weirdo character than a actual like fighter.
You said you're playing Ravenloft now?
No, I'm playing. So as a player right now, I'm in 3 groups.
Okay.
Curse of Strahd is Sunday nights, and in Curse of Strahd, I play a Warforged warlock. And I play on Saturday nights. I just started playing with a group that I used to DM for a homebrewed game, and they're all people in the film industry. And I play a bard, a dwarven bard, who is a little bit too flirtatious with everyone, and he's very like sassy all the time, and juggles when he casts spells and makes way too much eye contact and is like creepy. So I love that. First of all, I didn't realize how powerful you could be as a bard because I came in at 5th level, and if you choose the right spells, you can actually do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, bard is strong in 5e.
Yeah. And then on Monday nights, that's the group I died in recently and came back as a Bullywug sorcerer last week. So that's the group I've been with for years.
Yeah, the only time I gender bended was playing a dwarf. And it was not D&D, but a game called Torg Eternity. And Torg Eternity is like all these different worlds kind of collide and are like bleeding into Earth. And I kind of played her as a sassy kind of dwarf. And it was because my other character died, and that was one of the pre-gens. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play the dwarf then.
Yeah.
And that was a lot of fun. I lost my train of thought. I was going in a direction and distracted myself with Torg Eternity.
But, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I know what I was gonna say. Like I also, I just had a character death recently playing in Ravenloft, and that was my Twilight cleric of Muglubliet, who was a human that was raised by goblins. And I was like right there. I was like, you know what? He died. That's fine. Like he would want to go to his god's, afterlife and do, goblin things for all of eternity. But my party was like really trying to bring him back. And I was like, no, it's good. I'll just make a new character now. So.
I just had I have a player who's working on the movie, Ryan, who might be watching this. Hi, Ryan. He plays a character who's very dedicated to, he plays a fighter in one of our campaigns that I've been running on and off with some film folks. And he convinced a goblin to give up his worship of Magubliet for Torm, I believe, or maybe Tyr. I can't remember the god he got. But there was a whole like part of a game where this goblin was like forsaking his god for another god to be loyal to this fighter. It was a very funny moment. I love stuff like that. I love when like people change and shift for each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Or for an NPC or something like that. So
No, yeah, because in that game, like there was an Aarakocra in that game who, my character always kind of was subservient to, and called them boss and treated them like the boss, because they always described their characters being kind of shitty. And then the moment that really sold it for my character was when the Aarakocra was flying someone over this body of water that had sharks in it, and the GM is something happened, and the GM's like, you can either drop the person you're carrying or save yourself. And they're like, Fletch would save themselves. And then, like, from that moment on, like, my characters swore undying fealty to that character.
wow.
Because that character was like the most goblin person they had met.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was kind of fun. And then, so they had built this like relationship throughout the campaign. And then, the next session after my character died, that character was actually kind of able to like travel to the afterlife and see what happened to my character. And like the whole time during the Ravenloft campaign, I was just trying to convert people to Maglubia, and I'm like, hey, look, you get to fight orcs for all eternity. Like that was his big selling point.
Right.
And it wasn't until he died that that character actually took levels in cleric to Maglubia, and he finally got his first convert after he died. So,
really?
yeah.
That's you just made me think. Like I was thinking about this yesterday. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but one of the most stressful things about running D&D is when the characters get in a hostage situation. So I just watched this show. I just watched all 4 seasons of The Last Kingdom. Have you seen that show?
I have not seen that one yet.
It's so good. It's so good. Well, maybe not. You know what? It's not. Yeah. But there's a lot of moments between the Danes and the Saxons where it's like, put him down, and they've got like a knife to the throat and like, I'll kill him, I swear it, that kind of thing. And in D&D, there's a lot of moments where it's like, the player will be like, I put a scimitar to their neck and blah, blah, blah. And I say this, and I'm like, roll for intimidation, or vice versa. The big bad evil guy will take one of the characters or an NPC and be like, and I've realized of all the things that scare me the most in running a game, it's those situations. Being in charge of the game when a situation like that arises and choosing what exact dice checks to make them do and what happens. And I don't know, like I need to find myself a good Matt Colville video on hostage situations and D&D gaming, because I'm sure he has one out there.
If not, just tweet at him until he does. Start a Twitter campaign for everyone to tweet at it, Matt Colville, until he comes up with it. It's hard, right? Because the mechanics don't support the action sometimes. And like like the NPC does that, and the player's like, that's short. That scimitar's a die 6. I got 40 hit points.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a great. I mean, sometimes people will point out like a little bit of broken mechanics about stuff like that. And I mean, that's the biggest thing I've had to learn with DMing over throughout this pandemic is when is it more important to focus on story than the mechanics, or how do you homebrew the mechanics to make sense to the player, so that it's not like a one-time thing that they're like, the next time it happens, they're like, but you said, you want it to be fair.
Yeah.
So that can be tricky. But there's so many, I mean, I can Google almost anything and find, especially on Reddit, like other DMs talking about when this has happened to them and what they did. And that's usually where I go.
Reddit. I don't know. I've kind of referred to Reddit as the douchiest place on the internet.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're not wrong.
But there's a lot of information there. Yeah.
There's a lot of I have found some really interesting things there. About in researching this film and researching home brewing. But yeah, you're not wrong. Yeah. It's not the safest place for a woman either. I'd say, I don't know. YouTube has been really helpful. Dungeon Dudes, you guys, Nerdarchy, Dungeon Dudes, Matt Colville, Jenny D, WebDM. Gosh, there's so many. Fred Wheeler. I like how pragmatic Fred Wheeler's videos are. Like all of you giving all these resourceful, like here's what to do with this, or here's what we think about this race and class, or what we think of this new rollout or whatever, or what minifigs to buy, what blah 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 to use. Super helpful. So
I'm not familiar with Fred Wheeler. I'm going to have to check that out now.
Fred Wheeler, he's in New Zealand, I think. Fred, I can't do that accent. Please don't. Fred, don't hear this. You didn't hear this. This is not the accent you were looking for.
Is it Wheeler or Wheelin?
I think it's Wheeler, Wheeler. He does how to D&D on YouTube.
Okay.
He does little, really simple, short videos where he literally just says,
how to D&D, yeah.
Yeah, here's what flanking is. Okay, that was British. I can't. Yeah.
I don't accent either, so I will not. I'm not going to cast any stones. Although you're in the film industry, so I don't know. Does that mean you should be able to do accents?
Oh, I did theater for like 13 years, and I have to tell you that I probably bombed a lot of accents along the way. Sometimes I did okay. Sometimes I did great. But I do with D&D. The kids always make fun of me because they're like, everyone's just British or Scottish. And I'm like, yeah,
it's my thing.
It's all I can do. I've been like working on affectations and trying to keep everybody a little more, making the voices a little more about how I actually am on camera rather than giving them a different voice, like actually like mannerisms different for each NPC. But like virtually performing is hard.
Yeah. I always struggle with character voices because I always forget what voice I use, and like they all begin blurring together and being the same at some point.
I make little videos to remind myself because I was doing this demon for this character, and I was like, what has brought you to this K? And I was like, oh no, I can't. Like I couldn't remember how I'd done it, and it sounded so cool the first time. It never sounded cool. After that first time, I never found it again, even with my little like demon video thing. I started watching a ton of, for whatever reason, I had always sort of, I guess it was kind of like a little too popular, a little too mainstream. I'd always kind of like not thought about Critical Role. I never watched it. I never, and then I started watching it during the pandemic and am now obsessed.
Now you're a critter. That's how they get you.
I love them so much. And Matt Mercer is a god.
Yeah.
He's
get Matt Mercer in your film, and it'll be guaranteed to be a success.
I just told Grace at our last meeting, I was like, let's get Matt Mercer in this movie. So I don't care if it's like one. Let's just offer him whatever he wants. Like he's so focused, hyper focused when he DMs. And he's so smart, but he's also kind of funny and like, I don't know. And they're just all so charismatic and lovely. And, I'm watching Vox Machina and I'm watching The Mighty Nine. I mean, there's only so many hours in the week. So their sessions are insanely long, but like, I'm just really, I love them all so much. They're great.
Yeah, Matt is super genuine and a nice guy. Every time I've met him, he's been great, and all of the interactions have been very good. Sometimes you worry about meeting your heroes because they may not be what you expect. But in that case, everyone that I've talked to from Critical Role, they've been great to interact with.
They seem
and they're
very
super approachable.
Really? That's great. Yeah, they seem very they fell into something great, and it has had staying power, and that's a shout out to the game and to D&D itself, but also to them for their commitment and their creativity and their willingness to give so much time to something. And the fan base for that game, I mean, not for D&D, the fan base is huge, but for Critical Role, like the fan base it's just amazing. And I can see why now that I'm watching it.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the factors that's really contributed to the success of 5e and D&D right now is
Yeah.
because they've kind of gotten the word out so much, and they're such great ambassadors to the hobby. It's funny, like the first time we met Matt is when we went out to Geek and Sundry for GM tips with Satine Phoenix, and we were invited to come by when they were when they were having the session, and we got a chance to talk to Matt a little bit beforehand and met him, and it was really cool. And then like flash forward, like 4 or 5 years later, me and Ted are at Gen Con, and we were just like waiting for somebody in the lobby of the hotel, and Taliesin Jaffrey comes in and Matt comes in, and Ted grabs his Tal'Dorei book and beelines over to Matt, but like he's like stammering and totally like fanboying out and shaking a little bit, asking him to sign his book, and it was funny because he had met him before, maybe even more than once, but he hadn't been a fan then, right? And then later on, he kind of got into watch the first campaign, and then was watching the second campaign. Uh, I'm a huge fan of what they do, but I just don't watch stream games very much. We started watching theirs and doing reviews, and like at a certain point, we decided not to do it anymore. And I was so happy because they play for like 4 or 5 hours at a time,
Yeah.
and to me, it's like 2 hours of awesome entertainment stretched out over 5 hours. Because
Yeah.
like, and that's because like that's what D&D is. And when people say like that's not real D&D, I'm like, no, that's pretty accurate for real D&D at a high level. And those are the elements that kind of bore me as a viewer. It's like, it's like something I'd rather participate in than watch. I would fall asleep when they would start the combats, right? Like that, there's nothing more D&D than like combat. And that's the part that bored me the most. Like I enjoyed the interactions that they would have with each other and the role playing and stuff. But
I think I'm the opposite. I noticed I'm more engaged when they're in combat. But I do agree with you. Watching streaming D&D is, well, first of all, since I came into D&D by watching streaming D&D, I was a little bit more, I definitely can only do it for about 30 to 40 minutes at a time. I can't sit for longer than that. I just don't, my energy level doesn't work like that. So I have to come back to it. But yeah, that's really funny. You were talking about Ted getting kind of like nervous and whatever. Have you ever heard of the podcast, Hello from the Magic Tavern?
Yeah.
So that's Chicago. And I know those guys sort of. I know Adil Rafai, who's one of the most brilliant comedians in Chicago, and I see him sometimes in public, and it doesn't matter that I know him. I always stutter and I always say something really dumb because I'm such a big fan of that podcast. I'm like, that's chunt. I can't, and like the first time I remember he like came up to me to say hi. It's like, I heard you like the podcast or whatever. This was like a long time ago. I was like, what? And like, I said no words, and then I like started shaking, and I was like, is this like, is he like a superstar to me? Like, it's such a nerdy podcast. It's so funny the things that you can like fandom about. Like,
I've experienced it, I've witnessed it, and I've been on the other side of it. And it, you never get used to it, no matter what. It's just, I don't know. It's human nature. We like things, so.
Yeah, we get nervous. I get nervous. I was telling you, I get nervous when I run games sometimes, and I get really nervous. This is like a huge thing that's happening with me right now in Zoom meetings, because I have like sort of a built-in anxiety about technical issues, delays, interrupting each other, all those things that can happen on the virtual world that weren't so much a problem in person, because I'm really good at being in person, but not as good at this. So,
although it strikes me funny, but like I'm really good at being in person, but not virtual.
I'm trying to think if I was supposed to say anything else about the movie. I have my instructions here.
Yeah, feel free to bring up anything you like. You know what? Even like most GMs that I've ever speak to always say like even they still get jitters right before.
Yeah.
before they start a game. Like I've definitely even playing with like people that I'm friends with, and like, and then you start right, and then it goes away.
Yeah, when my band was still playing out before the the world started ending, I would always have a slight moment of extreme jitters, and I would usually have like a whiskey drink or something, and just a couple sips though, because you don't want to, and to kind of calm that. But once I started playing, once I'm on stage, totally gone. Like doesn't matter.
What's the
Not
name of your band?
My band is Sadie and the Stark. You can find us on Spotify. We're like goth rock, like
Yeah.
I think we're most often compared to like Susie and the Banshees, PJ Harvey, Joy Division. Kind of got a punker rock vibe, but like, every other word is like sword or crow or grave.
As you do.
Yeah, we've been around for a while, and we've put a couple lo-fi albums out.
Are you gonna do the soundtrack to your own movie?
That's actually a great question. We're sort of considering that. At this point, we have some dream songs we want in the movie, including just all these like. There's an Enya song we want at the beginning of the movie. There's like all these really hard to get songs.
Yeah.
So if the movie ends up being made for like $1 million, like, or whatever the budget ends up being, okay, we'll get those songs. But if we end up making it for like 600,000 or even like 400,000 and doing more of a micro budget indie Midwest film, yeah, I'm gonna write the music. My last short was a sci-fi short, and it had a song at the end. It had a dance number, and I wanted a Chelsea Wolfe song for it, and we just couldn't afford it. And a local filmmaker was like, he's like, you write, you play piano, you sing, like write the effing song yourself. And I sat down and wrote it, and it's actually on Spotify, and it's actually called Dungeon Master. The movie was not about D&D though, but you can look it up, and it's done really well, and like people like it, and it works in the short film and stuff like that. So you can always, everything is possible. It just might be really hard. Like there might be a lot of, so, and our movie is in that pivotal place where like we're loosely talking to actors and people in the gaming community, and we're loosely reaching out for funding. So if you want to be a producer or an executive producer on a film about D&D, please hit me up, because we are still looking.
And as always, folks, links are in the description.
But yeah, the writing the music would be, I already have some ideas for that and would be very okay with that. I also think that would be really cool to collaborate with some local Chicago and gaming folks in composing the music. So if we end up making that sort of second tier style version of Heart of the Trepid, that would be one of the ways we could incredibly cut costs. So
I think, did you see the Kickstarter? I think it was a couple years ago at this point. Orcs of New York.
No.
So it's based off of the people of New York. I don't know if they funded or not. We had them on for one of these chats. But yeah, so I don't think they did, because I think we were trying to angle for extra spots as orcs.
Oh, Dave, we absolutely are going to need orcs in our movie. So yeah. I'm going to, Grace, I don't know if you're watching, but when you do watch this, make a note, Dave and Ted, orc extras.
Or dwarves. I'm kind of short, so maybe.
I was actually just watching the making of The Hobbit, when all those Goblin Town, when they were using all those people in orc costumes, and they ended up having to scrap it all and do CGI because the costumes were so impossible to move in that people were like passing out, and they couldn't get the movement they needed because they built these elaborate costumes with it's crazy. Our movie does have, so the entire movie takes place over the course of one night, sort of in an ensemble style of like an ode to like Anniversary Party or The Big Chill or the Return of the Secaucus 7 or Home for the Holidays. It's these people playing D&D and getting more and more drinking and socializing and getting more and more into the game. And it does have a very small, very poignant ending inside of the game. And we are very much, you know, your fantasy world, your imagination is based on a lot of times where the world was when you were 10 to 15. And I'm a child of like the late 80s. So my watch lists and my mental place where this like world would kick in is like Krull and Gremlins and Willow and Explorers and all these like other movies like Labyrinth and stuff like that. And we want to stay true to that in the movie. So we don't want to create some sort of like super CGI crazy dragon swooping down combat. We want to rely on puppetry and practical effects and lighting and proper use of shadows and give an ode to the 80s a little bit in the game, because the people playing are going to be in the game are in their 40s, so their youth would also be the same as mine. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. Labyrinth and Legend, those movies still hold up. Although there's a bunch that do not. I was on a tirade with my kids for a while trying to make them watch old movies, like Willow and Legend and Time Bandits. And my kids are like, why are there so many little people in these movies?
Well, first of all, Willow is probably one of my favorite movies ever made. And I think it has to do with some sort of that nostalgia of connecting with it when you're a kid, connecting with it. But yeah, some of these films do have problematic moments. This is nothing to do with D&D, but I watched Weird Science for the first time a few weeks ago. It was one of my pandemic watches.
Yeah.
My jaw was, I could not believe, I've never seen that movie. I was like, oh no, this is like really problematic in so many ways. But at the same time, like, it was just so interesting because I've seen images from it, all through the years, and was watching it because Elon Mitchell Smith is a D&D gamer and a professor of medieval history now, I believe. And I was watching all the movies he'd been in, hoping to have a chat about D&D with him. And he was one of the boys in Weird Science.
Yeah, I vaguely remember what that movie was about because it's been so long since I watched it.
Don't watch it. It's two slightly prepubescent boys making a woman.
Yeah, I know the gist of what it was about, but yeah.
I was like, and I was so like, I was like, oh no, like, this is not okay. Cool.
Yeah, and also two prepubescent boys of that era too. Like, I feel like now kids are a lot more sophisticated than we ever were, and we were also kind of like terrible people too. So there's a little bit of that, but it wasn't as bad because everybody was terrible. But we've moved on since then.
I'm actually really impressed with, I've gotten to know a lot of the kids I play with literally just virtually. I've never met them. I've been playing with them for like a year virtually. They are kids. This pandemic is really hard on kids, especially teenagers and especially kids ages like 12 to 16. And they're struggling, man. I'm seeing it. Like, I'm seeing it firsthand. And they are trying so hard, and they are just doing so well and trying so hard. But like, a lot of kids are stuck in really small city apartments with bad Wi-Fi, and they don't have a lot of connections, and it's a hard time right now to be a teenager.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter is 16 and my son is 20, so we're right there in it. Fortunately, we have a decent sized house and decent sized yard, but still, there's definitely been times in the summer where my daughter is out there kind of playing fetch with herself, and like kicking the ball, chasing it, and kicking it.
Yeah, I mean, when the pandemic first hit, I actually, because I live alone, and like, I was like, I don't know, I have a 14-year-old corgi, and that's it. And I actually started going for like really long walks just to get like some sort of sanity. And then, Chicago's obviously been hit by some pretty rough weather. It's like 1 degree today or something. So going outside is not really as available at this time. So it's tricky for a lot of people right now.
Yeah, we've had the most snow this year in years, which I'm kind of happy about. I kind of like it, and we're supposed to get some more too. And during the pandemic, we got a new puppy. We hadn't had a dog in a few years. Our lab had to be put down at, I think he was 12 or 13. So it's been a couple years, and I'm like, we're all stuck in the house. Like, we're never going to have a time where, everyone's going to be here and be able to take care of a dog so easily. The downside is this dog does not want to be left alone ever, but
so wait, what kind of dog is it?
It's a Shar-Pei Mastiff mix. It's about,
oh my God.
She's like, she's just under a year, and she's about 50 pounds right now. So she's not like a big dog, but she's not a small dog either. And it is the most spoiled dog on the planet.
I can see that.
It's a circus here. We've got we had this cat that was abandoned that we started taking care of outside with 3 legs, that we recently brought in, and she did not want to be brought in beforehand because she just doesn't like other animals. But now it's cold enough. She's like, I guess I can come in. So she's like living in our upstairs bathroom and keeping her distance from the other cats. And then we have the older gray cat that we've had who likes to go and just harass her. He just sits in front of her and just glares at her, and then she just growls back. And then we have a kitten who we call the dog's boyfriend. This 2-pound kitten that wrestles with this 50-pound dog all the time. And I'm like, how has no one lost an eye? Because you look over, the cat's attached to the dog's face, or you look over and the cat's head's in the dog's mouth. They're just all the time going at it. And then the gray cat, our dog is terrified of. She won't go anywhere near him. If that cat's sitting in front of her food bowl, she's just not going to eat that day. He's the king.
I've been thinking about getting a cat. I love cats so much. I'm so jealous of your household. I mean, my dog basically sleeps all day because he's really old and demands food, and he's loving and he's my best friend. But I would love a little cat running around in here.
Well, in the morning, it's like a 3-ring circus. They might cure you that. The gray cat is begging my wife for treats. The little one is stealing the dog's food. And then the dog's complaining to us about this little kitten eating her food. We're like, just push her out of the way. You do it all the time. But when the kitten is eating her food, nope. So my wife is pulling out her hair, trying to make sure the dog gets its food, and and everyone is doing what they're supposed to do.
That's great.
Yeah, it is. Oh, we also have a couple of chinchillas as well.
What, really?
Yeah. The dog discovered the chinchillas a couple of weeks ago. Now she'll whine because she wants us to let her go see them, but she also has no manners, so she barks a lot. Wants to jump on the cage.
Yeah,
she's a little obnoxious.
Chinchillas are so cute
and soft.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So
that's great.
Yeah. So we've got a fairly full house here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. That's healthy. I mean, I think like with the state of the world, those of us that live alone, this was a little bit of a shock. I definitely know that some of my friends, I'm fine. I kind of do fine on my own, but I definitely had some friends who were just I need social life. I need to be able to go to the movies. I need to do this, this, and this. And I get that. We kind of have had when the pandemic started, I started checking on people that I was worried about, just calling them and stuff. And then I noticed that some of my friends were calling and checking on me. And I was like, oh, I must be, in their mind, I must be somebody they're worried about. And I was like, that's really sweet. That there's a little bit of a phone thing going on.
Yeah.
But
you do care.
Yeah. And then D&D obviously has been I play D&D so much with people online now that I don't feel like I'm alone. I'm checking in weekly for games and
pre-pandemic, did you have any in-person games?
I had the Monday night game was always in person for years. So
Yeah.
for 3 years, and then has been virtual for this past year. So and then with the kiddos, one group of kids I was doing outdoor live,
Uh-huh.
so socially distanced D&D, and the kids would have little masks on, and they would be, and then the map would be in the middle,
Yeah.
and like I would, but and then I did run some sessions at the park for some
Yeah.
adults, socially distanced, but uh, the only like in-person game I'd played a lot was the Monday night, and then sometimes I would go to Dice Dojo and play. So I'm self-conscious when I'm learning, and so going to Dice Dojo was great because nobody knew me,
Yeah.
so I could ask all the questions I needed to and make the dumb mistakes I needed to. That's kind of like how before I started playing with that group, that's kind of what I did first to kind of get an idea of what it was to sit at a D&D table. I played 5e and Pathfinder there. Had no idea what I was doing, Dave. I was so confused. And
None of us have any idea what we're doing when we first start.
yeah, it was crazy. But the community vibe was really cool there. And Chicago has a few different gaming stores that offer game nights that are really great. So when the pandemic's over, I hope to reach out to a bunch of them and make sure they know about the movie, and make sure potentially we want to shoot a scene at one of them, and just have the local Midwest gaming community, including C2E2 and bigger things involved in this film as it grows, because it's going to grow.
Yeah, I mean the difference between learning now and learning when I first began playing is huge. Like there's so many resources now at our fingertips. Like you just pull out your phone and figure something out. But
Yeah.
before, it's like you had to know somebody that played
Yeah.
to even know what the game was. Yeah, like for us, we got recruited by an older kid in the neighborhood who would sometimes play like backyard sports with us, and we're like, oh, this kid is so cool. But actually, he was like the nerd in his peer group, right? So, he would hang out with us, and then he like recruited us all into his D&D game. Which I'm thankfully did, because it's a hobby that we've been doing. I've been doing since my, I don't know, early teens, late tweens, somewhere around there. So
Yeah.
And you build lifelong relationships and friends from it. So.
Absolutely. I feel very lucky for my Monday night group, and they are very special to me and some of my closest friends now. And I know that this movie, when it gets made, will be dedicated very much to them, because they were patient with me as I learned how to play. And they're just such lovely people. And, socially, it's been such a learning experience. And I look so forward to it. And some nights, like our Monday night group is a little bit, I know you know how this goes. We will literally spend an entire session just talking to an NPC or shopping in town.
Yeah.
We're that kind of group. Like if it's going to be weird and goofy and a little bit off the beaten path, we're probably going to do it, and we're going to do it with all our heart. And
is that the Film People group?
That is not the Film People group. That is more of a just friends I met at a job.
Okay.
Yeah. Although one of the people working on the movie now joined that group. So, but the Film People play a little bit more analytically, or they play it more like Risk.
Oh, okay.
Or
I would have thought it the other way around, but yeah.
Well, it's not it's not actors and stuff. It's all like, designers and stuff like that. So
okay.
but they're they're getting there. But like,
and also they're all valid ways to play. So
exactly. And you know what? To be honest, it took me a while to learn that. I was actually, that was a lesson I had to learn as a DM. It's like, accept everybody's way of coming to the table. Like it's fine. Just make sure they're having fun. That's your job.
Yeah. I totally get that. And also, like, us as a group, we've had to grow and evolve over the years. And I think most of us go through that as well. Yeah. But we're just past the hour mark, so it's that time. Any final thoughts before we head out?
No, I will say, if you're watching, please do follow us. We need you. We need our community. We've got the links down below for Instagram. We've just put out a website. If you're interested in connecting with us, we're going to be making a community page, a community gaming page on the website. So if you have something you want to promote in your gaming life, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to support you. And Instagram, Twitter, and I made a Discord channel. I'm still figuring all of that out because I use that for DMing. And yeah, this movie's going to be a long process, and it's going to be hard. And we are very, very driven. So keep us in mind and stay in touch with us, and reach out to us with any thoughts, needs, questions, emotions.
Awesome. Thanks for reaching out to us. I'm so happy to have you on, and it's been great chatting with you. And until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.